Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tech Showdown. My name is Kevin, this is my co-host Teddy, and today we are doing our 380X Showdown. So it's going to be this Gigabyte Windforce 2X R9 380X, and it's going to be going up against the Asus Strix GTX970. Now the reason why I'm putting it up against the 970 is because I already said that the 380 beats the 960, so it wouldn't really make sense to put the 380X up against the 960 because I think it'd be obvious which would most likely win. So yeah, I decided to jump up to the 970, and also that price-wise, the 380X is sort of starting to get into 970 territory depending on specials and what model you are going for. So I thought that would also make for quite a good comparison. Now, sorry, I'm not wearing the jacket like normal. It's the middle of summer here in New Zealand, and it's just way too hot, guys. So yeah, it's already hot enough as it is right now because I don't want to turn my fan on or else we'll get all the fan noise, So yeah. Anyways, let's jump into the video then. The showdown, and let's start with what GPUs are running. So on the 380X you're getting the 28nm Tonga GPU. Now this is a fully unleashed, unlike the one you get in the 380. And over on the 970 we see the GM204 Maxwell GPU, which is a cut down version of what you'll get on a GTX 980. So that means on the 380X you are getting 2048 stream processors, and over on the 970 you're getting 1664 CUDA cores. Now clock speed wise, so the reference 380X will come with a clock speed of 970 MHz. However, this Gigabyte 2X model, that bumped up 10 MHz to 980, that full 10 MHz. Wow, Gigabyte, that's some factory overclocking. When we move over to the Strix 970, this features GPU Boost 2.0 like most NVIDIA cards do nowadays, so that means it'll automatically overclock if temperatures allow. So the highest boost clock we saw out of this guy was 1316, so that's a pretty massive jump up there in terms of clock for clock speeds. Memory wise, they're actually quite similar, so they're both coming with 4 GB of GDDR5 memory, both on a 256-bit bus. However, there is a bit of a difference in terms of the memory speed, with the 380X coming in with a memory speed of 5700 MHz and the 970 coming in with a memory speed of 7000 MHz. So quite a big jump up there. It also has to be noted that half a gig of the 970's 4 GB of memory is at a lower speed than the other 3.5 GB. Now let's move over to TDPs, and this is also somewhat similar, but bizarrely, even though technically the 970 here is the higher performing card, the 380X has the higher TDP coming in at 190 watts compared to the 145 watt of the TDP, but that's just showing off Maxwell's incredible power efficiency, and think that the GTX 980 has a TDP of 165 watts, so quite impressive there. Now coolers wise, the 970 is coming with a Strix cooler, has their nice fans here which have been redesigned, really big heat sinks, that's a big 10mm heat pipe coming out the top there, and this overall is just a beefy, really good cooler that I have really liked using. And it comes with a nice back plate. This is just a really good card. It's probably the second best GTX 970 from my point of view. I like the G1 Gaming probably the most. Now the 380X is coming with the Windforce 2X cooler, which honestly I'm not the biggest fan of. This hasn't performed well in the past, and yeah, I don't really particularly like it. However, we'll see how we go, and we'll talk about temps and noise a bit later on. Now let's talk about size. So the 380X is coming in at 41mm tall compared to the 970's 40mm. Lengthwise, it's coming in at 221 millimeters long compared to the 970's 280 millimeters long, so quite a bit shorter, and it's coming in at 114 millimeters wide to the 970's 140, so quite a bit more skinny. The 380X here is a much smaller card than the 970, so that's going to be good for people that are going to be doing mini ITX builds. So now that's all out of the way, let's jump into my new benchmarks. So I'm running 2 synthetics with Kept of Heaven, but I've also added in 3D Mark Firestrike, and 1 new game. So I put in Dirt Rally, but I've also kept 1 older game, which is Shadow of Mordor, sort of representing an older but very high requirement older game at all 3 resolutions. So let's jump in and see how these cards do. We're back. So quite interesting there with the benchmarks. First thing I have to say is I don't know what was going on with my Dirt Rally benchmark. It might be something to do with NVIDIA's drivers. It might be something to do with my benchmark. So I threw it in there just to, you know, show you guys what it came out as for me. And I ran these, I reran these, I tried to change things around. So I don't know what was going on for that one. But for the sake of consistency, let's disregard that benchmark just this time around and focus on the other 3 because they gave us more consistent results, and that's what I'm always looking at. So as far as that goes, you see that the 970 does come out on top. It averages to be about 10 frames per second better with the 970. However, what has to be noted, and that's usually the case when it comes to AMD versus NVIDIA, is that that gap closes quite significantly the higher up we go through the resolution. So you see the 1080p benchmarks are quite, you know, far apart, but then when we go up to the 4K ones, it does slim down quite a bit. So that's quite interesting, but it's still a win for the 970 with about 10 frames a second there. So good job, NVIDIA. Now let's jump into temps. So this was very interesting. I honestly thought that the 970 would run away with it again. However, I was very surprised at how well the 380X does, even with this cooler, which I'm not the biggest fan of, does in terms of temperatures. So for temps, I ran them both in the Unigine Valley benchmark and took the highest temperature I saw and also the highest fan speed. So the 380X went up to 64 degrees Celsius at 56% fan speed, and the Strix 970 went up to 69 degrees Celsius at 43% fan speed. So what do we take from that? Well, honestly, I got to call it a tie. The 380X did do better in terms of temperatures. It is, you know, lower, 64 compared to 69. However, that is at quite a bit higher of a fan speed. So I'd call it about a tie, because once the Strix, if you brought the fan speed up to about the same, it would probably be about the same in temps wise. So I would just call it a straight up tie between these two cards. And something else to note is that they both feature their 0 decibel technology, which means the fans are turned off till they reach about 55, I think, or 60 degrees Celsius, and then the fans will turn on and the card will work like normal. Which brings us now to noise. So how noisy are these cards? Nobody wants a hairdryer in their rig because that's annoying and it sounds horrible. So how did they do in noise? So this one, honestly, I've been using these cards both for about a week now, and I've got to give it to the 970. You can probably judge by the temps that with that lower fan speed, it's coming with quite a bit lower noise. And that was probably one of my biggest criticisms of this 2X Windforce cooler beforehand, was that when I tested in the past, it does kick out a lot of noise. However, as always, I'll let you judge for yourself. So this was also taken during the Unigine Valley benchmark, and up first is the 380X. And here is the 970 in the exact same benchmark. So noise-wise, you can see there, it's a complete win for the 970. Honestly, it's a much quieter card by comparison. 54 decibels compared to 60 decibels. So the 2X cooler is just, I don't know. I've just never been a fan of it. I think maybe it's because the heat sinks are really, really thin on it. They're just not very big compared to many other cards that I've tested, and I think that might be the issue. And so it ends up using quite high fan speed to compensate for it. Which brings us now to the conclusion, and which one of these cards would I recommend if you're in the market to buy one? So obviously we've got to bring price into the equation, and right now in New Zealand it averages out to be about $100 difference from the 380X to the 970. So the 380X is $100 cheaper than the 970. And when I take that into consideration, it still doesn't really change my mind. I think the 380X comes into a part of the market where, personally, I don't think it needed to be. The 380 still fill that mid-range area quite well, and there isn't really enough of a difference between the 380 and 380X to justify the 380X really even existing. So yeah. My advice would be to, if you're picking out of these two, to just go for the 970. Just save up that extra money. I know some of you guys are at school and it can be hard to save up extra money, but it is totally worth it in the long run. However, I would still probably, over the 970, probably recommend a 390, because the 390 and 970 are about equally priced. In some cases, the 390 is slightly cheaper, and the 390 is the slightly better card over the 970. So at the end of the day, it still remains the 390 is the best price to performance graphics card, and considering that if you've saved up that amount of money already, you may as well just save up a little bit more and get something like the 970 if you're going to be a NVIDIA fan, or go over to the 390 if you just want the ultimate price to performance graphics card. Now that's all from me and Teddy. Good old Teddy. People have been saying I don't include him enough in the videos, but it's been a little bit hard to include you lately, Teddy, but I'll try it in the future. Which graphics card do you like, Teddy? The 970. Teddy agrees with me. It is the better card out of these two. And Gigabyte really, really needs to get rid of this cooler. Honestly. Guys, time to rethink it. Now, thank you all for watching this video. Please subscribe to Tech Showdown if you haven't already, and like the video. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.